In the cold mountain streams of rural China, a strange creature hides amongst the rocks. An animal that can grow longer than the average person and is rumored to live up to 200 years. Meet the giant salamander, renowned for their rarity, strange way of life, and most of all their size. Unfortunately, these enigmatic creatures are disappearing at an alarming rate and are now on the brink of extinction. Over the past few decades, they have vanished from many rivers they once called home. So what is causing their demise? Well, to find out, we first need to know where they even came from in the first place. And the earliest members of the Cryptobranchidae family appeared all the way back in the Jurassic, roughly 170 million years ago. For reference, this means they diverged from all other salamanders before our ancestors split from the marsupials. This extremely long history without much change to their biology makes them so-called living fossils. Although actual fossils of the giant salamanders are notoriously rare, and we only have a select few to work with. The oldest from the genus Andrus found thus far dates to 28 million years ago. Remarkably, after its appearance in the Oligocene, it would go on to survive for 25 million years, only becoming extinct with the onset of the Pleistocene. Researchers have hypothesized that the dry conditions were too intense for this species to survive. However, it was far from being the largest extinct salamander. Its North American cousin, Andrus matthewi, could measure up to 2.3 meters long. Its size makes it the biggest salamander ever discovered. Presumably, the much warmer and wetter conditions of the Miocene enabled them to become so large. But whilst these animals are clearly ancient, the fossil record doesn't reveal much about their origin, which is why we instead need to look at genetics. And a 2018 study of the Chinese giant salamander's mitochondrial DNA revealed something strange. It found that instead of being a single species, the Chinese giant salamander was split into several, possibly up to 7 distinct species. What is even more astonishing, however, is that they had split from each other between 5.7 and 10.3 million years ago. This is an insanely long time given that the average species only survives for 1 million years. In fact, back when they diverged, you and I were still swinging around in the trees. So how could scientists not realize that they were highly distinct species? Well, Chinese giant salamanders are actually a cryptic species group. Whilst debated, a species is generally defined as a group of living things that are evolving together over time. This means that some species may be indistinguishable from one another, with genetics being needed to tell them apart. And so far, 5 giant salamander species have been described. The South China giant salamander from the Pearl River Basin, the Jiangxi giant salamander from Jiangxi province, the Chinese giant salamander from the Yangtze River Basin, the Qimen giant salamander from the Huangshan Mountains, and the Japanese giant salamander from southern Japan. Out of these, the South China giant salamander is noticeably larger. The biggest individuals can reach up to 1.8 meters in length and up to 59 kilograms in weight. However, I don't want you to think that large size is all that makes giant salamanders unique, because they are one of the few groups of salamanders that can communicate. They produce a range of calls such as hissing, barking, and even what sounds like a baby crying, explaining its Chinese name translated as infant fish. Perhaps this call is a trick, as despite appearing friendly on the outside, the giant salamanders are ferocious predators. They sit near the top of the food chain, preying on a variety of aquatic animals, such as fish and crabs. But there's also a much more sinister part to their diet: other giant salamanders. One study found that 28% of the food weight they consume is from cannibalism. However, luckily for them, they don't need to eat that much. If needed, they can fast for several years. Giant salamanders are also remarkable for their parental care, with males protecting and cleaning the nests. Their slow and simple life gives them a very low metabolic rate for a creature their size, making them some of the longest living creatures on the planet, with reports of up to 200-year-old individuals. The oldest verified individuals in captivity lived over 60 years, however. This is still remarkable for amphibians, putting them only behind the olm, who lives to 70 years in captivity. Unfortunately, few giant salamanders ever attain such ages in the wild, as they are declining at an unprecedented rate. 2 species are classified as critically endangered, and 2 more are yet to be evaluated. So what could have caused these once common creatures to become so rare? The most detrimental threat is hunting, which sparked their decline in the 1950s. Despite being a Class 2 protected species in China, poaching is still very common. This slaughter is driven by consumption of their meat, which is considered a delicacy in Eastern Asia. The high demand has caused prices to reach $400 per kilo on the black market, meaning a poacher could get up to $10,400 per salamander. For many of China's people, the reward is too high, compared to the potential fine of only $6. This infuriatingly low penalty fails to dissuade anyone from killing the salamanders. It's important to mention that with the average yearly income in China being $13,000, the average citizen certainly isn't dining on giant salamander. Unfortunately, poaching is just one of the many threats facing these animals. A study conducted 25 years ago found that 90% of their suitable habitat in China has been destroyed. The biggest single driver of this habitat loss is the damming of their streams. Not only do they serve as barriers which fragment the remaining populations, but they also alter the water level and cause siltation. In some cases, stairs have been built to allow animals to travel upstream, but thus far they have shown little success. And although not obvious at first, deforestation is a major threat too. This is because the soil erosion that it causes makes it hard for the giant amphibians to absorb oxygen through their skin. Their permeable skin also puts them at risk from pesticide and chemical pollution. Additionally, fertilizer and livestock runoff causes algae blooms, causing the water temperature to soar. This is particularly detrimental to the giant salamanders, considering their need for very specific conditions. At temperatures above 20 degrees Celsius, they stop feeding altogether and die if water temperatures exceed 35 degrees Celsius. These requirements mean that climate change is also a big threat. In recent years, ranavirus has caused localized declines, with the giant salamanders appearing to be very vulnerable. To try and mitigate their decline, the Chinese government has created 14 giant salamander reserves since the 1980s. In Japan, hunting of the giant salamanders is not their biggest threat. Instead, they are most threatened by the damming of rivers and hybridization. One particular study found that 95% of individuals in certain populations were hybrids with introduced salamanders from China. Another thing that I should discuss is the farming of giant salamanders in China. In 2011, 3.7 million giant salamanders were being farmed for their meat, a number which has only increased since then. These figures are extremely worrying considering that less than 50,000 remain in the wild. There is no evidence to suggest that farming has alleviated poaching, and has probably only increased demand. To try and help, the Chinese government used to pay farmers to release some into the wild. But as mentioned earlier, the Chinese giant salamander is many different species. This means that many species are now largely hybridized. And although the giant salamanders are doing better in Japan, they get no government help, leaving it up to non-profits. However, conservationists have a hard time helping them as it is illegal to touch them. This means that they can't even move the salamanders over dams, so they can reach their breeding grounds. Giant salamanders aren't restricted to Asia though. In North America, their ancient relative still clings on, the hellbender. Despite its name, this 74cm salamander is harmless. These animals are found across the eastern United States, from New York to Georgia. Like its Asian cousins, the hellbender is likely made up of several different species. One of these possible species, the Ozark hellbender, is the most threatened. This isolated population has declined 77% since the 1980s. This decline is thought to be primarily due to chytridiomycosis, leaving an estimated population of just 590. While these amphibians are highly endangered, there is still time to save them.